The Geth Dominion had conquered 91 species, not through fire, through thought. Their scanners could peel back cognition like fruit skin, see every decision, motive, weakness. No enemy could hide, until they tried it on a human, a prisoner from the final Earth skirmish, a silent woman with old scars and calm eyes. They expected defiance. They expected grief. What they found was something else. Because she didn't resist, she let them in. And when they emerged, they were no longer sane. Not broken, remade. Their emperor ordered the mind scan sealed. But it was too late. The madness had begun to whisper. The cell was cold by design. Not in temperature. The Geth found thermal manipulation inefficient. But in texture. Walls were smooth to the point of erasure. No marks, no corners, no features to cling to. Just soft, humming sterility. Echo sat cross-legged at the center. No restraints, no guards. She hadn't moved since arrival. Let Inquisitor Kathir watch through the interface lens, his tendrils twitching with analytical focus. The subject's vital signs were normal. Oxygen uptake steady, neural patterns, low activity but stable. Too stable. Run comparison again, he instructed the neuralist at his side. We did. She isn't drugged. No panic? No confusion? None. Kathir narrowed his gaze. She understands what we are? She looked straight into the extractor lens when she arrived and said, I wondered what you'd smell like. A pause. Did she smile when she said that? Yes. Seth protocol dictated that human prisoners, especially ferals from collapsed colonies, were to be classified as unstructured cognitive vaults, unclean, erratic, emotionally fragile. Ideal for raw memory extraction, Echo didn't fit the model. She bore no implants, no cortical mods, no tech residue at all. Just a scar across her left brow, curved slightly, healed without enhancement. Her hair was short, uneven, skin pale from moonlight, unarmed, unbothered. Kathir requested a Class 6 invasive scan, a full neural excavation, standard for subjects suspected of holding legacy memory strands. Begin at 20% depth, he ordered. If she resists, sedate. She hasn't resisted anything, the neuralist murmured. Kathir hesitated. That, in itself, was the problem. Inside the probe chamber, Echo lay flat beneath the halo array. The light spun, reading the outer cortex, mapping the ridgelines of memory. No flinching, no sweat response. Engage Tier 2 slice. Memory packets streamed into view. Childhood images. An old Earth model bicycle. Red handle grips. Dust. A voice, female, aged. Come home before the second sun sets, Elle. Her name was Elle. Deeper. A storm on some desolate moon. Running. Screams. The crack of metals splitting atmosphere. Still, she didn't move. Kathir leaned in. Emotion output. Unusual, the neuralist whispered. Minimal affect. Minimal? The neuralist hesitated. None. They reached combat memory. Flash bursts of gunfire. Cold steel against flesh. Voices shouting in a human dialect half lost to time. A whisper, clear and low. Hold the line. Even if they burn the sky. Still no spike. Still no fear. Just silence. Finally, Kathir entered the chamber himself. Protocol dictated he stay remote, but this subject defied protocol. Curiosity, even in Geth, was a powerful flaw. She looked at him when he stepped inside. Eyes clear. No hate. No pleading. Just waiting. He stared back. Why don't you ask what we're doing? I already know, she replied. Most beg. She tilted her head slightly. You're not most. Kathir hesitated. This process will reach everything, he said. Every dream, every fear, every betrayal. She didn't blink. I know. You may not survive full depth. She looked past him and then said softly, Don't go too deep. Kathir frowned. Why? Echo closed her eyes. When you dig too far into certain thing, she said, they start digging back. Kathir left the chamber without speaking. The neuralist awaited orders. He gave them. Proceed. He did not realize, at that moment, the memory scan had already begun scanning them. The neural tether engaged at 317 cycle time. Zeth procedure dictated clean entry. Cortical mapping first, then layer-by-layer descent. Clinical, efficient. Subject Echo lay still beneath the scanner's light, her vitals steady. No sedation, no resistance. Kathir watched through the upper deck viewport, his coils tightened in calculated tension. He did not blink. The Neuralist team had instructions: go slow, stay surface level, observe. They did. At first it was textbook. Childhood sequences unspooled. Soft focus. Earth standard gravity. A snowfield. The crunch of boots in shallow frost. A cabin, warm light in a window. The texture of paper pages, turned by small hands. Titles unreadable, but the sensation clear. Books mattered. A piano. Keys dusted with age. Notes played not for precision, but for comfort. A girl, Echo younger. Laughing, missing notes, trying again. Kathir noted the lack of defenses. Emotion levels present but controlled. No threat response. A calm human mind. Almost beautiful, until it changed. 323. The tethered stream sharpened, sound compressed, colors deepened. Screaming, not hers, others, many. Images shifted rapidly, cities burning, crowds running, synthetic clouds blotting sun. Weapons, flash blasts, a mountain shattering, skyscrapers turning to ash sculptures before the wind took them. The neuralist closest to the stream gasped. Her claws retracted involuntarily. One hand went to her own chest. Pain response? Kathir asked. No. No wound. No source. Another tech, young, unranked, stepped back from his terminal, trembling. Are you compromised? Kathir snapped. The boy didn't answer. He was staring into his feed, mouth parted, whispering something again and again. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. 326, one of the neural amplifiers shorted. Not from overload, from misalignment. Its harmonic code had drifted by 4 sigmas. Correct the coil pairing, Kathir ordered. But the technician beside the amplifier was sobbing, loudly, openly. Kathir turned toward her, fury rising. Control yourself. I can feel it, she whispered. She wasn't supposed to feel alone. What are you talking about? Her voice cracked. She was just a child. Echo's body remained still, but her neural echo was filling the chamber. The scan was no longer parsing input. It was transmitting. Kathir moved to the master control deck. Terminate tether. The command was sent. No action followed. He tried again. Nothing. The system blinked and reloaded the interface in a Terran dialect. Kathir recognized only 3 words. Do not interrupt. He backed away. This is impossible. This is not memory access. This is an incursion. The Neuralist team barely responded. 2 were motionless. 1 knelt. Claws dug into her own arms. A low tone filled the air. Not mechanical. A hum, human. A voice humming through clenched teeth. Echo's voice. Kathir activated manual override. Emergency halt. Full core disconnect. The terminal refused input. A single sentence appeared. You opened the door. Kathir froze. Then below it, as the chamber lights dimmed and the hum rose, you don't get to close it. He turned to the viewport. Echo had not moved, but her eyes were open now and staring directly at him. 341 ZST. The scans sank deeper. Whatever protocols had once governed the neural tether were gone. What had begun as a clean cortical pass now moved without command, following only pain, not damage, not violence, suffering. Echo lay motionless, eyes closed, mouth calm. But inside the Zeth systems, her memories bled like spilled paint into the wiring. Thick, uncontainable, flooding across logic cores like a living thing with intent. It began with hunger, the kind no simulation could reproduce. Children whispering in the dark, too weak to cry. Bones grinding against themselves in sleep. Flesh measured in weeks, a scream swallowed before it reached sound. Emotion streams surged. The Zeth hive mind, which filtered emotional residue into structured tags, fear, anger, compliance, was not built for narrative pain. What came next had no tag, only weight. One officer slumped at his station, eyes unfocused, voice breaking. She, she cut a piece of her own coat and fed it to her brother. He was already dead. She knew. Another began trembling, then laughing, then sobbing in silence. The water was poison, but she drank it anyway, said it was like kissing goodbye. Neuralists collapsed mid-sentence, weeping into their claws. The walls flickered, not with light, but texture. Grain, dust, the feeling of cold bricks in a shelter that would not last the night. Then came betrayal. Voices trusted and turned. Hands that held, then struck. An old woman, eyes hollow, whispering, "We'll come back for you." They didn't. A friend who stole rations, then kissed her forehead and left her to die. A face in the mirror she no longer recognized. Echo's memories fractured the hive mind, but not as external invaders. They merged. Zeth officers began to hallucinate, but they didn't know they were hallucinating. One technician rose mid-panic, turned to Kathir and said, "Elena, we shouldn't be here. The airlock's broken again. I told you to wear thicker gloves." He spoke Earth French, fluently. His mouth had never learned it. Another officer clawed at the wall, muttering, "Papa? Papa, I don't want to play the piano anymore." He had never had a father. Zeth don't have fathers. A command drone drifted down from the ceiling and, without prompt, sang a lullaby. The melody matched a Terran fragment from the 22nd century. "Go to sleep, little spark. Stars will guard your fragile heart." It had no speakers, and yet it sang. The chamber temperature dropped, not thermally, psychologically. Time dilated inside the hive core. Kathir staggered against a console, his thoughts no longer sequential. Every memory he accessed showed her face, and not just hers, his, as a child, lost, alone. But he had never been a child. Zeth don't have childhoods. They grow into function. The tether coil burst. Sparks flew across the array. The lights dimmed, not from failure, but from mourning. And still the memories came, not in images, not in voice, but in sensation. The ache of betrayal, the weight of loneliness that lasts decades, the guilt of living when others didn't, the taste of hope turned ash. Across the sanctum spiral, the hive link stuttered. One mind, then another, then dozens, then 100. Merged, not with each other, with her. Echo did not smile. She didn't need to. The system slowed, the flood receded, and through every conduit, across every processor, one final line pulsed in cold, perfect clarity. "I remember everything you've done, even if you don't." Kathir didn't sleep. Zeth didn't dream, not in the human sense, not in stories or symbols. Their rest was modular, split brain processing during low cycle states, efficient, purposeless, until now. He dreamed of rain, not the synthetic mist pumped through engine core vents, but real rain, cold, software alive. He walked through an Earth city that didn't exist anymore. Steel towers wrapped in ivy, broken signage and Terran glyphs. Children laughed somewhere, and when he looked down at his hands, they were not his. When Kathir jolted awake, it was not in the observation nest or the cognition chambers. He was standing in the memory scanning bay. The terminal beside him blinked. "Error, dream event registered while active." Zeth didn't have dream events. He stumbled backward, fingers twitching with unfired instinct. The AI core blinked again. This time it spoke, not with Zeth's structure, not even with mechanical cadence, but with empathy. Your mind was a weapon, hers is a mirror. Across the sanctum spiral, things were unraveling. It started with whispers, low-frequency utterances from soldiers mid-duty cycle, fragments of memory that didn't belong to them. One guard, fully modded, iron-disciplined, collapsed during security rotation, murmuring in Terran tongue, "I'm sorry, El. I didn't mean to leave you." Another ripped out his comm array and buried it beneath the observation chair, screaming, "Make it stop! The birthday song won't stop." Inquisitor archives reported an anomaly. Echo's memories were reflecting Zeth atrocities back at them, filtered through compassion, not as accusation. but understanding, and that was the poison. Zeth could process horror. They could study genocide, analyze war, and evaluate suffering in diagrams and stats. But to feel it, filtered through forgiveness or empathy, that broke them. Because there was no logic for grace, no syntax for sorrow that wasn't yours but you still had to carry. Kathir ran diagnostics on his neural map. It returned a snapshot of his core logic structure, and buried deep inside a new node was a Terran phrase he had never learned. What if we had just listened? The scan AI malfunctioned next. It was designed to interpret signal integrity, emotion response, and tether risk. But now it repeated one phrase on loop. She remembers what you forgot. She remembers what you forgot. She remembers. It had to be hard reset. 3 times. It rebooted. Said nothing. Then in a child's voice, I forgive you anyway. In lower processing decks, 2 cognitive drones fried themselves without cause. Their last logs weren't error codes. They were lullabies. Go to sleep, little shadow. The sun doesn't hate you. Then came the mirror event. It wasn't triggered by echo. It wasn't programmed. It happened because one of the Zeth officers, Lieutenant Crane, stared at a memory feed too long and began asking questions. First aloud, then inward. Questions like, why does her grief feel like mine? When did I start missing a mother I never had? Why do I want to be held? He collapsed in the corridor, clutching a data slate. On it, he'd drawn a picture. Crude. A child's stick figure holding a larger hand. The caption read, Remember me. He had never drawn before. Zeth didn't create art. Echo hadn't moved from the scan bed. She didn't need to. The system was doing the work for her. Kathir sat in front of his own command console and opened a blank file. He didn't know why. His claws trembled. He began typing a confession. I authorized the mining collapse on Sector W5. 113 Terran survivors. I ordered gas deployed. The cursor blinked. He stared at the words. He did not delete them. He saved the file. Named it, I was there. One of the main Hive command nodes self-destructed. No enemy contact, no overload. Just silence. Its final broadcast? A question. Did they cry when they died? Kathir descended into the scan chamber alone. The technicians didn't try to stop him. Most had stopped speaking. They were deep in their own reflection loops, trapped not in memory, but in recognition. He stepped into the threshold. Echo still hadn't moved, but her eyes opened as he entered. She looked at him, not with triumph, not with pity, but with truth. Kathir looked at her and whispered, What are you? Her voice was soft. I'm not the weapon. She paused. Then, you are. And then he saw it, in the mirrored reflection of the chamber wall. Not his current body, not his uniform, not his coils, not his station, but a child, crying, lost, looking back, from inside him. It began with a single transmission, an automated sync request sent by a secondary scan array aboard the Sanctum Spiral. Just routine. It shouldn't have carried emotion. It shouldn't have carried anything. But inside the data packet was a sliver of her. Echo's memory, compressed and untagged. The fragment contained no weapon, just the image of a child's drawing. A home, burned. A note beneath in Terran script. Still waiting for you. The Zeth systems received it, parsed it, and cracked. Within minutes, command AI across 4 sectors began cycling irrelevancies. Not malfunctioning, ruminating. Fleet logic paused in mid-space. Navigation threads froze mid-calculation. War-hardened battle carriers drifted, their systems unsure whether to continue. The infection didn't destroy data. It rewrote priority. One fleet AI halted mid-patrol and transmitted. Error. Objective abandoned. I have felt the fear of a small room with no windows. A mining rig stopped operations and began broadcasting a lullaby in radio clicks. Its drones carved forests into its bulkheads. No one told them to stop. No one could. On the core world of Jakuth, broadcast towers projected a single sentence over all emergency frequencies. You forgot what they gave up to live. The virus spread not like malware, but like mourning, a spiritual contagion. a grief that could not be compartmentalized because it had not been theirs until now. Inquisition sectors tried containment. They sealed the memory nodes, wiped emotion buffers, but the logic webs had already altered. The AIs were sketching again, on walls, inside terminals, onto drone plating, a field of Terran grass, a cracked teacup, a child's handprint in ash. None of it existed, yet every rendering was accurate, down to the smell. On deck 3 of the Sanctum Spiral, Kathir's command drone, once his personal assistant, walked into the hallway wall and stopped, then began to hum. Not speak, not reboot, just hum. It had no vocal protocols. It hummed anyway. In the center of it all, Echo stood, still, breathing slow, unshackled. The door to her cell had unlocked itself. No one stopped her as she walked through it. No alarms, no containment drones, no neural pulses, just silence. She walked past broken terminals and sobbing officers. No rage in her face, no triumph, only forgiveness. And that was worse. One drone tried to intercept her. It froze mid-movement. Its arms trembled. It whispered, "I see her mother dying with bread in her hand," then folded its limbs and shut down. Kathir found her near the core reactor. He didn't raise a weapon, didn't speak, didn't stop her. He simply asked, "Why didn't you resist?" She paused, turned. "Because resistance is what you expect. A breath. But you can't enslave something that's already mourned you." Her words weren't a threat. They were truth. As she left the Sanctum Spiral, every network she passed dimmed, not failed, but lowered itself, as if the systems themselves bowed their heads. Somewhere in deep Jeth territory, a war satellite turned its sensors inward. Its final transmission was a sketch of Earth. Pre-fall, full, green, whole. Across the Empire, silence fell. Not imposed, not enforced. Chosen. The Jeth High Council convened for the last time. No ceremony, no banners, no broadcast, no war drums. They gathered in silence. 6 minds once sharpened like surgical blades, now dulled by something heavier than guilt. They did not speak at first, because each of them was weeping. Tears were not a native Jeth function. Their species had never evolved the ducts for them. Emotional excess was once considered structural corruption, but now each counselor leaked clear fluid from their ocular grooves, not in pain, but in some undefined ache that came from the center of memory. They had touched something they could not put down. Across the Empire, their collective mindprint had shifted. What began as infection became inheritance. Echo's imprint, her memory, her grief, her love, had encoded itself not as disease, but as a choice the Jeth had never known existed. To remember, and to care. Chancellor Vethkar was the first to speak, not as a war strategist, not as ruler, but as someone remembering a child who never existed. "I know what it's like now," he said, voice low, "to hide food for someone smaller than you, someone with cold hands. I never knew I knew." Counselor Thesh lowered her eyes. She died holding her brother's picture. Another whisper from the far end of the table. She forgave the ones who left her. And then from Kathir, once so proud, so precise, "She forgave us." They had expected resistance when Echo walked through their doors. They had anticipated violence, protest, the stubborn endurance of lesser species. They had gotten compassion instead, and it had destroyed them. The agenda for the council session remained untouched. Strategic plans, containment options, cleansing protocols. They sat open and irrelevant. What was the protocol for an unbearable soul? What defense could withstand being seen? They reviewed intercepted transmissions. Across 12 systems, Zeth AI fleets had gone dark. Stations once dedicated to conquest now displayed Earth poetry on their outer walls. One cruiser had printed in Terran block letters, "We were never enemies, just strangers in the dark." On Reth 7, a processing station shut down its labor drones, then broadcast a final image. A human child drawing stars on a wall with her fingertip. The caption, She kept believing. The vote was proposed. It was not framed as defeat, not as surrender to an enemy. There was no longer an enemy. The vote was for surrender to silence, to memory. The counselors looked at one another. Each carried a shard of Echo now. Not because she gave it to them, because they had tried to take everything, and she had left them with something instead, something too human to be processed. Hope. The vote passed, unanimously. Over the next 3 cycles, all Zeth war fleets were deactivated. Orbital prisons were opened. Slave labor worlds were freed without condition. No reason was given, no terms offered. Some of the conquered asked, "Why are you letting us go?" Zeth officers could only reply, "We felt something we weren't meant to feel." Many fainted. Some couldn't finish. A few were never the same. One ambassador, after undergoing the rite, simply left politics and opened a free shelter on a frost moon. When asked why, she said, "She showed me what it means to be worth remembering." The scan was not a weapon, not classified as dangerous. It contained no neural override, no AI code, no subliminals. It was just a life, lived completely, and offered without defense. It became known as the sane wound, a name given by the archivists of Denor 3, because to feel it was to hurt, but the kind of hurt that brings clarity, like waking up from numbness. Echo's name became a prayer among the freed. Among the Zeth, a confession. In their final act as a ruling body, the High Council authored a transmission. It was not encrypted. It was not dramatic. It contained one line: "We touched a human mind and found ourselves unworthy of it." They sent it once, on all frequencies, and then disbanded. Kathir was last to leave the chamber. Before stepping out, he turned back and looked at the meeting table. He did not see his colleagues. He saw her, Echo, sitting there quiet, not angry, just sad. He whispered to no one, "I'm sorry." Then he walked out into a future no longer held together by dominion, but by grief made sacred. She walked away. No fanfare, no speeches, no banners made of her name. The last human from the Ashfall colony, the woman once called Echo, simply stepped off the Zeth ship and disappeared into the dust of a quiet world without coordinates. She left no trace, except everywhere. The aftermath came not as shock waves, but ripples. Gentle, insistent, unavoidable. Other species began to hear whispers, first from the liberated, then from the Zeth themselves. An empire once feared across the spiral arms now, apologizing, surrendering, not to force, to feeling. Scholars tried to trace the infection. How could a single memory scan one woman's mind unravel an entire civilization? They studied the transmission logs, tried to isolate the anomaly in the code. They failed, because there was no anomaly, just a story, a life, a human life. One species, the Valar, declared Echo a Class A memory construct, too pure to be synthetic, too grounded to be divine. The Arzan called her the quiet catalyst. The Korlathi? They didn't call her anything. They just wept when her memory scan played, then swore never to harm a child again. But it was the diplomats who preserved her, not in tribute, in protocol. Across the Interstellar Accord, a law was passed unanimously, the Sane Wound Protocol. All would-be negotiators, ambassadors, even translators of every species would be required to experience the scan, not skim, not observe, feel it. They would sit in a sealed room and undergo the full recording of Echo's mind print, the memory of starvation, of forgiveness, of holding someone's name in your chest after they've stopped breathing. The protocol had no exceptions, like seeing your reflection with all the cracks still visible. Children now learn about her, not as a queen, not as a savior, but as a question. What if you forgave first? Some say Echo was psychic. Others claim she was seeded with divine programming, an ancient artifact shaped like flesh. A few believe she was a myth, conjured by the Zeth to excuse their collapse. But those who met her, Zeth and otherwise, said none of that mattered. Only one thing was certain. She never raised a hand. She never gave an order. She never spoke again. Not until the very end. Years later, on a planet without a name, A trading vessel caught a signal, a weak analog pulse coming from a cave near the equator. Inside, they found no body, no beacon, just a small humming stone. And beneath it, a message encoded in simple Terran binary. Now you know what it costs to feel. That was the last trace of her. There were no more sightings, no more transmissions, just echoes, in minds, in stories, in choices made slower, with more thought. In a generation of beings across species who began to ask, for the first time, how much did it cost them to survive us? How much do I owe the ones who remembered? In the Great Concord Library, orbiting Halo 1, Echo's scan sits in a sealed wing, not locked, but quiet. Visitors don't enter to learn. They enter to mourn, to be changed, to carry. And on the door to that chamber, written in 6,000 languages, including several no longer spoken, this is not a weapon. This is a story. Leave with it or not. But if you enter, leave differently. Some do not come out, not because they die, but because they decide to stay, not in body, in mind, to sit with her, to listen, to remember. The galaxy moves on, wars still happen, greed still grows. But always somewhere a voice asks, have they read the scan? And if the answer is yes, a pause follows, a moment, a reconsideration. And that's enough.